All right, this is our second bonus episode of the Objective Arete podcast. For this specific episode, I'm going to be hosting because this goes hand in hand with two articles that we've recently published in the Arete Journal about a man called Terry Peters. In fact, I'm sitting down with Terry Peters in this episode. This is somebody that most Green Berets respect. He was a great leader while he was in. He's been an amazing and accomplished leader since he's been out. He created a company. He's the CEO of a company called Leader Solutions and Decision Support, LSDS. And that's what the articles that we've written are about, his leadership while he was in the military and then what he's done with LSDS. Every time I get a chance to sit down with this guy, it's just full receive mode, and I can't possibly take enough notes. He's just a wealth of information. And man, this episode is incredible. There's so much to learn from Terry Peters. So I'm not going to say much more than that. I'm a stand-in I'm a stunt Mike Lareria, our normal host for this one. I'm not as good looking. I can't speak as well as him, and I don't quite have that, I don't know. He's very charismatic. I learn a lot from Mike, but I'll never be as charismatic as him. But anyway, I'm okay with that. With that, let's get to the show. All right, Terry, welcome to the world famous Falcon Snail Pub.
Thanks, Chuck. This is a pretty darn fancy. And now that I know where it's at, I'll be camped out outside.
I say world famous, but there was actually an incident where this place got raided by the cops and the police chief got involved because one of my buddies thought it would be funny to put it on Google Business. So it said Falcon Snail Pub, and there was photos in there, reviews, all kinds of crazy stuff. And yeah, I mean, luckily I knew the police chief, so he's like, hey, but they had to come and they'd check it out. Like, no, but people were showing to the front door, like, hey, there's a pub on the map. I was like, nah, man, it's a joke. Let me get that taken off. But
that's awesome. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, you gotta love mischievous buddies, right?
Right. It was cool. All right, so we're gonna get right into it.
Okay.
So we've written one article. We're about to publish a second article. By the time this comes out, people will probably be waiting for the third article, right? It's about your leadership and about your company that you started after coming out of the military, right? So the first question related to some of those topics is, one of the things you told me before writing the articles is you wanted to get around this perception that people in special operations had, especially the very high performers, that somehow people are going to be chomping at the bit when they get out because what they were doing in the service was practically equivalent to having an MBA, right? So let's just delve right into that topic.
Yeah. So I think first let's, I'd like to start with the things that special operators bring. They are incredibly intelligent, very adaptable, can solve a ton of problems. But, our experience in the military, and you and I have had a, colorful career, to say the least. We were exposed to all kinds of businesses, organizations, our own government, other governments, and we were relatively learned with respect to how things worked. When you get into business, and I'll give you one of my first interactions as a story. One of my first interactions was with the Young Presidents Organization. Our company was asked to run an offsite for 60 executives out in California. Fantastic experience. And one of the things that I did there was I gave a vignette on what failure looks like, and went back through one of the deployments I'd been on where ultimately we lost folks. And I finished this very powerful vignette. And I finished, and the guy who asked me to be part of it and then was really helping me orient to business, if you will, he said, "Hey, Terry, can I take you for a walk?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, "What did you think of that closing vignette for this 3-day offsite?" He said, "I think it was good." And my heart hurt a little bit because it was pretty emotional. And he said, "Look, can I give you some advice?" Of course. If you're going to work with business, you said you used to, understand culture and speak languages. If you're going to work with business, I'd encourage you to do that here. Because if you believe that we're going to pivot to you and try to understand what USASOC and ODAs and any of those other 10 acronyms you used are, we're not. No doubt you have something to bring to business and organizations, but you're going to have to really work to speak our language and understand our culture. If you don't fully adopt our methodology and understand business totally, I would expect you're going to struggle. And that single point, the learning of business and how it works. If someone is leaving special operations and coming to business, picking that up on the go is tough. And you don't leave with some ornate ability to be able to do that out of the gate. And so I've read several articles on LinkedIn that say, special operators have the equivalent of an MBA. And I just disagree. I mean, fundamentally disagree with that. We've had people in our teams with MBAs and they have not done well. And so, our team has, PhDs and a complete collective of talent. But there are plenty of people who are not on our team anymore who are incredibly well educated and left the military and just struggled, even with all of the coaching and assistance I did or failed to give, couldn't make it. So the evidence doesn't prove that, to say the least.
Yeah. And then, one of the things we wrote about is how companies don't like to hire senior military people sometimes, right? Or a lot of times.
Yeah, there is often, several things we run into. First, companies want hungry, intelligent, people who are going to join their team and make a difference. They want learning mindset. They want adaptability. What they don't want is someone who comes through the door, feels like they're worth a significant amount more than, the 22-year-old with a degree in that space who's coming through the door after them. And then they don't want to work hard every day. And I'm not saying be on time. I'm talking, drive that think about whenever you're in the military, you think about those ranks of E4, E5, E6, O2, O3, O4, where you're hungry and you're learning and making a difference and driving every day. You're first in, last out. You're just committed. Organizational commitment is there. That's what they're looking for. The fact that you've got some great experience, fantastic. That gets you in the door and might give you the ability to demonstrate that. But if they're waiting on you and you're not hungry and excited about it, you're not going to do well. And historically, when we have those informal discussions with, hey, you're looking for talent, who are you looking for? O5s and below, E8s and below. And many people are very honest off the record about that. Why? Because they're still at a point where they work. They still have a lot in the tank. They can still give us a lot. And so there are plenty of people, and for the 06s and 07s, 08s in the room that are listening to this, the E9s who got on done very well. There are plenty who are exceptions and exceptional. But there are some who, man, they're just...
But you got to make yourself exceptional.
Yeah.
It's not your ranks, and that's not going to make you
exceptional. No one has... I don't think ever. There's some people that have read about me when I'm working with a company and say, hey, can you tell us a little bit about your career? But no one has ever said, oh my gosh, you were a Gesotive level E9. We should, tell us what you want us to do. No, it doesn't work that way.
A company, just because you have that rank of E9, they don't care, right?
Yeah. And so, the reality is very few organizations are going to give you a ton of latitude because of your prior rank. Now, there is a point, there's plenty of our, 3 stars and 4 stars have retired, and some of the senior enlisted leaders associated with those have done really good jobs consulting, helping companies at the strategic level on boards and all that. But those are very few people.
Right. And they got to make themselves exceptional. Right? They've done that themselves.
Yeah. And they also still have to stay just as hungry because, again, you can find a retiring 3-star, 4-star about every month. You can find one. So they understand you've got to do your homework. You've got to be ready. But, the thing that I would tell anybody is those best practices that you applied in DOD when you work there, especially in SOF, get up every day, you work out every day, you learn something every day. You get in, you realize that the people around you are busting their butt every day, and you've got to hustle to keep up with them. If that's your mindset, you're going to do just fine. If it's, hey, I've already done my time and I'm senior and I should be treated senior, and I think, people should work for me, and, it's okay for me to not work as hard as I used to. The organization whatever organization is going to hire you is going to get relatively disappointed with what they thought they were getting versus, what's actually sitting there. And how does that manifest itself? Hey, Terry, I disagree. I got a great job and I'm doing just fine. Okay. How many people are getting promoted around you while you're still stagnant? How many people aren't coming through your door for advice, assistance? Where are they going to? Just like you and I both know, in when we were in uniform, there were people who would line up at the door out of other organizations because you had something to offer that would benefit them. That same thing happens. It's key to success in our business, but it's also what happens inside organizations when people work there, and when you're not as effective as you could be or what they hoped. People vote with their feet. They'll go somewhere else to solve their problems, to seek solutions, to get someone who can solve the problem for them, or make a difference on the team. And I think, that's the challenge many senior leaders have. It's a challenge special operators have often when they come in, because, we've had significant challenges with folks joining our ranks. One of the hardest things we had to teach people to do is not run assessment and selection for organizations we're working with. Yeah. They're already on that team. It's not about assessing and selecting them. It is about understanding them and helping them perform better. Two different things completely.
How many times since you've been out have people looked and said, "Oh, wow, man, you were a sergeant major"?
Never,
right?
Never. I mean, I think the TSA guy, when I'm going through checkpoint and I hand him my ID card, he's like, "Wow, that's," and usually it's
nobody really cares,
another retired enlisted guy is like, "Man, that's good," but that's about it. No one cares. I mean, they understand leadership. The language that resonates with anyone is teamwork, leadership, capability, humility. Those words resonate with anybody. Those are agnostic of past jobs or future jobs. But it really is, how do you align with a team and how do you make a difference? That's what you need to bring every day, versus some sense of, they need me. they may, but you've got to earn that need.
Right. So what would be more impressive than if you were working for a company or helping a company with hiring, and Chuck Ritter showed up, right? And you knew two things based off what you're looking at: that one, he was an E9, and two, that he had Rock'em Sock'em Robots and He-Man stuff in the corner. Like, what would be more of a...
So believe it or not, we actually help companies with interviews. If you can lace the Rock'em Sock'em Robots thing into the interview, they're probably going to hire you, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, right?
Because, well, the issue with hiring, I don't want to take this too far off the track, is hiring's tough, right? It's why we're so big on LinkedIn profiles and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Because in most companies we work with, the old school kind of hiring panel, if you will, like we would think promotion board, that thing's gone the way of the buffalo, the way of the buffalo, right? Really what they're trying to figure out is, are you the right fit? When I worked at Selection Assessment years ago, and when I worked back on Camp McCall, the intelligence, capability, and fit were the three things that we broke the course down into. It's still the same thing, right? Is the person, are they intelligent enough to work here? Can they take that intelligence and apply it with the competencies that are needed in their specific field? And are they a fit? Yeah. And that last one is arguably the most important. So is Chuck, hey, is he automatically a fit because he did this thing? No. Companies that hire unicorns that aren't a great fit but have great talent, those unicorns and the organizations often collide with each other pretty quickly. Or they make exceptions, and that fractures the culture for the rest of the organization. So, but I think that piece of, one of the questions that many organizations ask is, what changes when you come through the door, Chuck? If you were going to walk into our company and we were considering hiring you, what changes when you come through the door? And the belief there is you'll talk about what you bring, but also what you want in a team and how you're going to positively impact that team. The answers that come out from that, though, may not echo those thoughts for sure.
I'm sure a lot of people come in like, well, this is what I'm going to do to change the world, right?
Yeah, right. Again, the organization is existing and probably succeeding. That's why they're hiring. Yeah. So how do you understand that and enhance it and make it work? And then how do you generate value day in, day out, day over day, week over week, year over year? That's where it gets there. And it's not like for special operators, man, unless you've got a really cool job, you're not jumping out of airplanes, you're not shooting guns, you're not blowing stuff up. Most businesses don't do those things. If you're in one of those businesses, fantastic. But most businesses don't do that. Most businesses are really solving a problem that, it's products or services. That's where businesses are. And I think as you think about how do you fit into that and make a difference, it's all those things we saw the best leaders doing, and best teammates. They genuinely care about each other. They're committing extra time to solve problems for the greater good. They're letting people know that they're available to them to help. And that's the stuff that we see.
Yeah, I think that's important for, at least if you're getting out of the military, people to wrap their heads around. I was pretty surprised doing the cups of coffee with the Honor Foundation because of the feedback I got. And I think a lot of people, they go into these jobs and they're like, well, I'm awesome. I've done all these awesome things. My rack is on my uniform is cool, but they don't care how awesome you think you are. They don't care how much awesome, accoutrement you have on your uniform. Like exactly what you said. What are you bringing of value right now and going to continue to bring a value every day you come in this door?
Yeah.
That's going to, and your ego and how awesome you think you are isn't a value, right? That's not, and what you did yesterday also isn't a value, right? Because you can quickly become irrelevant. And we see it in E9s all the time, right? They make that jump to E9, they stop educating themselves. And then it's like, okay, well, how are you of value to this organization now? Yeah. So you were awesome last year, but now you're in this position.
Did we talk about a fixed mindset and that, hey, I'm pretty sure I've got this down. We have found that just that will crash you into a wall very quickly. When we, in our company, we go to work with any organization, our research team, we have a research team. I ask them to pull every bit of information we can on that industry, that company, each of those leaders. And then I begin to add information to that from the very beginning. As you might imagine, walking into different industries, whatever that may be, to help them, that's something that, hey, Terry and his company have had a lot of experience in these things. That'll get you through the first meeting. The first time someone sits with you, meetings are broken. You begin your first engagements, first questions of learning, not let me give you advice out of the door. It's a 3-to-1 ratio of learning early on, learning versus input and then lifting. But you've got to figure out what that is, because if you can't engage them in their native tongue and understand their culture and get them and meet them physically and mentally where they are, emotionally where they are, and help them move, and you're gonna create friction you just don't need. And they're gonna see you as that person who has that great idea, the big hand, little map person. We've all seen them. The good idea fairy shows up and says, all you got to do is just this, sprinkle some dust on that and it's going to work just fantastic.
Council of Colonels.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The COC. Yeah. And that's the challenge, right? And this is where, when we talk about making a difference, someone asked me, like, what do you do that's unique, in your company? And I'll say, I think I bring the best of NCOs, non-commissioned officers, special operations non-commissioned officers, and I'm surrounded by just endless talent, right? From in uniform general officers to educators to everyone else that we can bring and we put to a problem set. But that, hey, let's make a practical difference. Let's train, learn, develop, grow, solve together. That's the thing that we're bringing, versus all you got to do is do this and, call us when it's done and we'll come back and give you some more advice. And that's the thing that's the trap that senior NCOs fall into. Senior NCOs get to a point where, depending on how they've applied their effort, they turn into traffic cops, right? And it's, hey, just do that. Don't do that. They don't really do anything, right? They don't really get dirty. They don't really physically, get into the mix. They stay above it all and give guidance and kind of see how it works out. There is a place for that, but most of those jobs are already filled. If you're going to make a difference with your team, it's not, hey, you guys ought to move that stuff over there. It's, hey, let's move it. And then you go physically help. And I think that engagement piece is what sets those successful people apart. I'm ready to get dirty. I'm ready to engage. I'm not above it all. And it is a tough change because, again, there's a point in the military when you become very senior where you get used to the door being open for you, right? This was a phrase I heard one time. Like, when was the last time you actually pushed on a door? And I'm like, I don't understand. Don't people usually open the door for you? I'm like, yeah, but you don't even think about it, right? Because someone's driving you, the door gets open, you're walking someplace, somebody opens a door, the places are all set. You don't think about where the tables and chairs go. But when you leave, if you've adopted I deserve that, man, organizations don't do that. Hey, we've got a meeting coming up. You're the one setting the tables, getting those things done. And I think that mindset around just make a difference, get in there and work for your team. That's what you want folks to know. Be smart and learn, but you're not above any of it. Get in there. And I think it speaks to, if you do have a leadership position, do those things we know: circulate, communicate, take notes on individuals, find their core motivations, those types of things, and make it work.
Well, I was visualizing when you were talking about the whole thing with the traffic cop thing. I was thinking about a guy with a PT belt, like blowing his whistle.
Yeah.
Like, and if my video editing skills are good enough, when I edit this, I'll put that. I'll have that pop up in the corner.
Yeah, traffic cops, right? We don't need another. Again, the challenge we run into with people leaving DoD. They're going to revert to, and this is I don't want to get into my theory of E9s, but they're going to revert to the last place they felt comfort and safety. Whatever those behaviors were, that's what they're going to apply in their new job.
That's a dangerous place to be, right?
Yeah. Remember, think about it. Every senior leader, the best job, they're the most capable of the job they just left. That's why we're prone to micromanagement sometimes. And everyone, if you're not sure what you should be doing, you're going to revert to those behaviors that were quote unquote successful last time. It's the challenge we have in business and in the military when people are promoted to a place where they just don't have any experience. They're not learning. They're not gathering all the resources they can to figure out what behaviors need to change as they take over new roles. And it's the same thing when you leave the uniform and you're going to a new job. That assessment of what behaviors do I need to apply, what competencies are going to be successful here, that's just good old-fashioned hard work and analysis.
And realizing you don't know enough ever. And if you ever think that you do, you're probably in a pretty dangerous position.
Yeah. I mean, years ago when I was just wrapping my head around this concept of transition assistance and helping folks and all that, one of the things that I was at some gathering. Maybe it was I took a federal acquisitions class many years ago, and they were talking about leaving the military and going into private sector or DoD work with contract companies. And one of the things that came up was, hey, I'm a vice president of Lockheed Martin, and I've been on the job for 35 years. I'm retiring today, and I'm gonna go be a general in the Army next week. Why do you think you can do that? Well, I don't know. Why do you guys think it works the other way? Yeah. And so, so that's the same kind of, that mindset of, no kidding. We appreciate your experience and your capabilities, but those organizations have been thriving. Yeah. Your goal is to get there, apply vigorous effort to make a difference and move forward. And again, some folks realize that, hey, I don't want to put in 10 hours a day or 8.5, 9 with homework. I want to take a part-time job. And that's fantastic. The ones who struggle are the ones that aren't sure what they want to do, right? Yeah. And this is that, hey, I'm pretty sure that I want to stay super connected to my soft roots, but I also want to be super successful in something away from the defense industry. And man, that has caused calamities for us, right? I think I told you the story of one of our early on sets of pretty large scope contract for us at the time was helping a tech company build a leadership program, and to have your boss stop you in the middle of a sea of people working and ask you to listen as you hear a member on your team talking about the first time they shot somebody in the face in the middle of a company on the West Coast, and you kind of take a deep breath. Your heart kind of skips. And then the young person who's mustering all the courage they've got says, I don't know what that is. We don't need to know that. And if you don't get a handle on that, you're not going to be here by the end of the week, you and your company. That's one of those where I got it. You think you're helping, but you're not. And you've got to let that go and harvest the best practices there and apply those. I haven't met any company except one occasion that asked for war stories. And they actually asked for them because
I
they
thought
were.
you were going to say that asked for a class on how to shoot people in the face.
No, yeah, they were. Yeah. So that's a different. That's a bit of a challenge. But that piece of, what are the things I need to, no kidding, bring to the forefront? What are those competencies, characteristics, approach, mindset that I need to bring to the forefront? That's where the analysis goes on, right? And I think, the Honor Foundation does a great job of exposing everyone to just different industries, people, leaders. I think that is so valuable, right? And I think the way that course is designed is incredible. What I'm not sure is if each individual is really thinking about that engagement from the perspective of the person they're sitting across versus just, hey, that was good, here's what I learned. But no kidding, looking beyond where that person's sitting, like what are the requirements of their job every day? What are they doing? What is a day in their life like? What are the skill sets that I have now would be practical to apply in their job? Like that extra piece of homework after those cups of coffee, that's going to align you much more appropriately to understand that walking in. Versus, hey, I'm hands on hip. I got all the badges you ever want that you'll never see. Some of them are on my car, that kind of thing. But that a piece of, no kidding, the opportunities are presented and the evidence is put forth. You just got to be able to understand that evidence, do the analysis, and then adjust, right? And again, special operators, like instead of, hey, you have the equivalent of an MBA, you have the skill sets to adapt, change, and make a difference. That's what they do leave with. Every special operator, any MOS, definitely leaves with that capability.
Nice. All right, switching gears here. This term that I really hadn't heard put in this way, which we just wrote about, invisible friction. Let's start with, well, what is it? And then let's talk about how you've run into that and how you overcome it.
So I need friction for anything to move forward, right? That's friction begets traction, traction begets movement. With energy, you can move forward. But invisible friction happens in every organization. You think about the last time we worked together, right? You're E7, E8. I'm at the 06 level as an E9. For everybody in the audience that doesn't speak Army, 3 echelons, 4 echelons above. And you would hear something that was perceived that I had said, or maybe did say, then gets translated, twisted, and there's this person in your team or in your organization that says, that guy's full of himself. That doesn't make any sense. You've interacted with me. Your opinion is not quite that far gone. It's a little less than that. Like, no, actually, I think we should give him a chance. Now that friction that's created in that moment in time can happen. That's an easy example. What is harder to see is the friction between biases, proximity bias, favoritism, blind spots. The list is endless that causes an organization to perceive one thing and intend to execute another thing. It also is, the reason why in many organizations, open, blunt conversation just doesn't occur. Chuck, you're not meeting the standard, or Terry, you're not meeting the standard. Those are rare conversations. Often they're much softer. Chuck, on the last 2 projects, we fell a little short. Tell me how you're going to resolve that. That's the equivalent of, in our old language, 4 explicatives, a couple F-bombs, on top of those other explicatives to tell you, hey, you're not, we're behind, we're not getting there. But that friction occurs. I mean, it truly does occur in organizations. Subtle, and that invisible friction is hard to see from the outside if you can see it from the outside. And we know this because, we are blessed to be able to go into organizations with logos, and be able to work inside those organizations where leaders are trying to figure out, hey, help me understand all of the dynamics at play and where I need to apply time so that we can move forward with less friction. We can move forward with a more cohesive team. But that invisible friction it is ever present. And it's like one of the guys who used to work with us had this saying of be first among peers if you're all at the same level. That phrase in itself, though a great aspiration for someone who wants to be the first, is implying that there's also a lot of invisible friction going on there, because that how do you get ahead of peers? How do they see you? What are your actions to make it so that you or your team are ahead of the other ones? Those are all dynamics, human dynamics at play, and I think that's the piece that we see a lot of from the inside. It's also been something we've dealt with, internally. And I think, one of the things that, you write about in the articles is, all of the things that we have seen in other organizations, we have, I think by percentage, much less of them, but we are not immune to those types of things. And we stay amazingly focused on culture, atmosphere, supporting our teams, but it doesn't mean that we're immune to those types of things.
Can you even escape it if you deal with humans? It's a human dynamic, right?
It's humans. Again, you think about like the best leaders we see in the space of humans. Man, they really understand where that human's coming from, right? Empathy, core motivations, focus, goals, desires, and they align to those and help them optimize their performance for the greater good of the organization. That's a great thing. But if you go back just a little bit, when you had people coming back to work in hybrid environments, think you've got 2 leaders of your 4-person team who are working remote, and you've got 2 in the office. You will spend more time with those 2 in the office than you do those 2 that are remote. And those 2 that are remote are going to get less of the the walk-by conversations, some of those informal touch points, those types of things. And you're creating friction that you're not even mapping in some instances, because you're just using available time. And so that friction occurs, and sometimes it's quite, creates a significant impact. Sometimes it's subtle, but it's there. And it shouldn't be, I don't think trying to eradicate it is ever the answer, because there's a goodness to that also. There's a goodness to allowing, teams to understand it, work through it. Every time you insert someone new, there's a new personality dynamic there that has to work through, but understanding it. And if an organization begins to lose momentum, things aren't solved well, we'll throw a culture label on that, like the culture of that team is changing, but there are other points of friction there that are probably occurring that are out of balance, if you will. And that's throwing the team dynamic off.
And even you told me the story about, when you're all of a sudden you're growing that facial hair out because things were slumping. You're creating some friction there and you didn't even realize it until you realized it, right?
When we talk about, nonverbal communication, we often talk about, shifts in body, changing crossed arms, that kind of stuff. But when you change behaviors, if you've shaved every day for, let's say conservatively 50 years, you shaved every day for 50 years, and one day you walk in your office and you've got, a beard that you haven't shaved in 2 weeks, and your chief of staff, who is one of the most amazing humans I've ever met, she looks at you and says, "Everything okay?" "Yeah." "Okay. You sure?" "Yeah." "All right. Well, you've had more time on your calendar free. You're not engaging. You're not out and about, right? You're basically she's giving you all the indicators of your withdrawing, and you're like, "No, I'm fine." And then okay, and then when you finally work through this, you sit down and say, "How did you know that I was not doing well?" And she lists it. These are all the indicators, and then you realize just how much of a burden you've placed on everyone else, because like we talked about before, like how are you making a difference in your team? Well, if you figure that out and you are making a difference in your team every day, when you change your behaviors and stop making that difference, someone else has got to cover that, right? Or it doesn't get covered and momentum slows and all those things. And this becomes the cascading effect of, we've messed with a success recipe and we're not trying to fix it. We're just keep messing with the recipe going the wrong way. We're not tasting it anymore. We're not trying to figure out what's wrong. We just keep adding stuff or taking stuff away in this case. And pretty soon, man, one of the things I realized when I was in my my time away a couple of years ago, when you build a company, and right, wrong, or indifferent, you are the lead, the hood ornament of that company, if you will. You're the thing they see. When you stop circulating and you stop talking about your company, you stop taking advantage of opportunities. There is no way lead generation is going to occur at the same pace. There is no way you're going to be able to grow people who care and want to spend more time with you. There's no way that grassroots business growth is going to occur. And it's difficult if you're not feeling it, right? We talk about mindset, enthusiasm, passion, those types of things. If you're not feeling it, it's hard to let people understand why they should engage you at all.
Yeah.
The difference in, enthusiasm alone is the difference between a potential client calling you or someone going, I don't know if I want to hire them. Right.
Yeah.
And that call never occurs. And then, the deal, once they can see your work, if you're doing good work and your mindset's right, man, work grows. So that's the thing. And again, the team being very professional, kind, courteous, they're dropping hints, but no one sat me down and says, hey, boss, you're screwing us up. Right.
Yeah.
You are causing issues for us because you're somewhere mentally engaged, but it's not here.
Yeah.
We need you back, or we need you to cut free and put somebody else in that job. And so those are the things, like when you work through that, like one of the things that we talk about learning, we work through that. The chief of staff and I sat down. We said, okay, let's map the behaviors that you saw me exhibit. Let's map the ones that I mapped for myself. Let's capture the ones I mapped for myself, and let's begin to look out for these markers, leading indicators in the future. And that has been tremendous for us. A couple of weeks ago, I grew my beard for a week, and she goes, "What's going on there?" And I said, "No, I just, it's a good thing. I just wanted to grow it out. Nothing's wrong." But the conversation was had, and we worked through it. And that's I think, teaching the organization how to identify where people begin to deviate, and then what are the right actions, what's acceptable. That's how you begin to understand friction, and then take appropriate steps when that friction isn't healthy friction.
Yeah. And it's called invisible friction because all that stuff is happening internally, but everybody looking in, clients, the people like me, whoever, like, man, everything's going wonderful, right? There's absolutely no problems in LSDS or with Terry's doing amazing. Yep. They're crushing it. That's who I want to be like. That company is what we want to mimic. But the reality is, like, and that friction's going on in every company. There's no
absolutely.
organization, even the military, even in a marriage, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's there. You don't see it, but that's why it's invisible.
And you think, sometimes companies call us and say, hey, we have these goals and objectives, and we're either stagnant, stuck, we're not making them on time. Will you help us map these, right? And when we affectionately know it as a gap and needs analysis. When we do a gap and needs analysis, we take all of those things that you could map, and we put them into 4 distinct buckets of what with respect to where they're falling. And one of those is leadership and leadership application. Like, is the person in the chair the right person to lead? Do they have the capability? And then are they applying those behaviors, competencies, building those routines? Are they present, genuine, those types of things? But when you talk about those points of friction, like, if they're not, what's the self-correcting mechanism the organization has for that? Yeah. Because if they're in and you and I have both been in organizations where, one of the things that I love about DoD is you get a new perspective on leadership every 2 years. And if you're NCO and your officer on offset cycles, you get it every 12 months or so. But when you get an experience of what good leadership is for the organization and how it benefits you and your team every 2 years. And you and I have both seen comparative analysis of this person is significantly better for the organization and for our goals and objectives than the other. Mm-hmm. In business, those people don't change out every 2 years. They're there. And so if there isn't some mechanism in the organization to give perspective and feedback and help them apply themselves, pretty soon what they are is this thing to avoid, not this value added factor in the organization. And that's something that when people come in and ask us, hey, what are you seeing? Like one of the first questions we ask senior leaders is, what do you make final decisions for or on? Well, I advise and I assist and I do all these things. No, but I mean, you're a vice president or a president or whatever, and, executive director. What do you make decisions on? What's final? What needs no one else to look over? And when you get one, maybe two things, and you get that, and everybody else has got 20 or 30, when you map that out, that's an indicator that you're either, these are two very significant things, or you're potentially part of the issue that we've got to work around. And I think that's, when you figure out how decisions are made in an organization, how problems are solved, there's a lot to work through there. But this point of this, to your idea of this friction and those types of things, it is invisible friction is real. It's not a bad thing. I mean, to be clear, it is part of the organization. And when the dynamics of friction change and the organization is moving at a different pace and speed, it may warrant, some attention.
But it can be a bad thing if you ignore it.
Yeah, it can be incredibly bad if you ignore it, right? If it's something that is causing, you think even where you need synchronization of effort and people, if you've got one part of the team that's moving in harmony and moving well, and you've got another part of the team that has another part of the equation to solve, and there's constant friction and turmoil there, and you don't do anything, and pretty soon the gap of ability is wide there. And if you all have parts to deliver, your project or program is going to be stagnated because this team is ready, sitting idly. Those people who are idle are going to get frustrated, potentially vote with their feet and leave. These folks can't get their act together, and they're not gonna be part of that collective problem solving.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought about it as invisible friction before our conversation. But that's awesome. Let's keep this one kind of brief, but we're talking about the culture or the friction in organization. Let's talk about culture. I think it's kind of a throwaway word that doesn't a lot of times mean anything because people use it in this ambiguous way all the time. But really, if you get down to some specificity with it, I think it is a powerful thing. If you get two people together, there's a culture there. The culture exists. Once you got more than one human in a room, there's some kind of a culture now. So defining that as you guys see it through the lens of LSDS when you go into a company or even your own internal culture, like what, let's define it. And then what's the so what?
Yeah. So, culture for us, above and below the waterline, right? In essence, what is it, what it's like to work here, right? What does that mean, from a holistic perspective? Above the waterlines, all that stuff that, we preach and we talk about, we've labeled, and we got all that.
Pretty words.
These are our values. This is what it means here. The below the waterline stuff is what happens when you actually walk through the door, right? These are the interactions of the team. This is how, auto-correcting, self-correcting occurs. This is how the team adjusts norms. This is how we bring you in and make you feel like you're valuable versus we leave you alone. And let me give you some, we have mapped that day one in an organization is incredibly vital. The first 2 weeks are also pretty vital. 6 weeks is the next checkpoint. And then at 90 days, you kind of got what you got. So day one, 2 stories, 2 different companies. Day one, company making a couple dozen million in the Northeast. You show up to that company on day one, the president of the company meets you at the door and says, hey, today's day one orientation. I'm going to hand you off to the HR director. This is what you're going to experience today. Hope, I was part of the hiring. Hope you have a good day. 5-minute conversation. Off they go. End of the day, person checks out with the president of the company again and says, hey, how was your day? Tell me what you got. Somewhere in the process of that day, there's been delivered to their home. There's been a gift card for the restaurant they've identified they'd like to take their family to. Some arrangement, whether it's edible arrangements, flowers, something along those lines, and a note from the president says, thanks for letting us have Terry today. Day was a little longer than normal, but we're honored that he's on our team. Day one. If you can answer the question at home, what do you think this job's going to mean and how's this going to affect us? And it's positive. Day one probably went well. Across the country, day one, finish getting through, entry level paperwork and onboarding. person from your team receives you, points down a long hallway to a terminal and says, "That's your desk. Login information's on the screen. I'll see you tomorrow." Which one's going to go home with, "Man, today was a great day and I'm happy to be here"? So when we talk about culture, right? None of those things above and below the waterline, hey, we receive our people on day one, it's professional and it's good. Both could state the same thing. There wasn't anything unprofessional about the second one, but that piece of how do we truly think about that person, bring them in, all notes are being taken in company number one, so they understand more about that person. They know things like, hey, these are the age of my children. This is what I'd like to do. They're beginning to build that. That information's flowing back in that someone is listening to and making a difference. Above and below the waterline, we care about our people versus no, we really care about our people. So, at the end of the day, if your culture is beyond words, it really is actions. Leader actions and behaviors are the number one driving factor for culture in any organization. If those actions and behaviors are positive, focused on understanding that human, optimizing their performance, your culture is doing something well. Yeah. If you're stating it, you got stuff all over the walls. I've been in so many places where it's all over the walls. It's everywhere you wanted to see, like, my gosh, that's perfect placement. Can someone tell me, anyone give me the highlights of your mission statement? I think it's, they're looking off in the distance, squinting to try to understand it for the first time. Or someone says, what's it like to work here? And they can actually answer it. Like, it's awesome. Why is it awesome? Let me tell you what I get out of the job. Let me tell you what they do for us. Let me tell you what happened. And so, when we built a company, one of the things that I wanted to do was really take the best of the things I had learned inside special operations and make those normal in the company. And we, I say it now because it's much more than just my verbiage around it, but we genuinely care about everybody. And that means not only do we love and care for them, but it also means we love our larger team enough so that if someone isn't performing, we will take those steps for corrective action and or dismissal so the greater good isn't burdened by someone that everyone else is having to carry their workload. Yeah. And so that's all part of building that healthy culture. But it really is, what's it like to work here? Not just in word, but in deed also.
Yeah. So really it's, when you got all the pretty signs up but no substance, it's cultural virtue signaling with no substance, really. It's what the Army does really well. It's doing the right thing, which is you should have this stuff, but then you're doing that thing wrong because the substance is there. You're not. Yeah. It's like when you have SHARP posters everywhere, and SHARP is like, okay, well, yes, we should have a SHARP program, but is this really affecting a potential issue? I'm not going to look at my water bottle like, oh man, I'm glad I have the SHARP ball. Now I'm not going to go harass somebody today. That's not the way it works, right? It's all virtue signaling, but.
Yeah. And
what's the real culture?
Well, and I think that's the piece where, in our company, again, you think about things you learn. So if you'd ask me on, the day before opening day of LSDS, way back when, and you said, hey, Terry, 5 years from now, what's it going to look like? I said, it's going to look a lot like an SF company. We're going to have a PT bar out front. We're going to be, it's going to be awesome. And then, probably 2 years into this, maybe 3. You look around one day and the biases I brought with me from the Army have gotten our entire company not where it should be. Mm-hmm. We've got special operators in leadership positions, and they're not doing a good job of leading. And we've got, and by leading, I mean understanding the populace of the company, aligning with them, understanding their focus and motivation, and moving toward them to solve the problem versus I'm the leader, you should be doing things my way, moving out. The best leaders never do that. And in a civilian company, that's not going to work out for
Meeting people where they're at versus trying to pull them in.
Exactly, right? And it's we will meet you where you are, mentally, physically, right? And that is for our own team also. So,
which is hard, isn't it? Because as humans, we're like, especially if you're a high performer, you're like, I have all the answers.
Yeah.
People will just do what I'm doing.
Well, it's the old scuba school adage, right? If you can't keep up, we'll run faster. A breath of water is like no breath at all. All the things I learned from scuba school, right? But this idea of, hey, who are our best people? So one of the exercises I run is I look at performance and potential, and I draw a list of everybody in the company down, and I write performance and potential beside them. And I try to give them, many years ago, I saw this. I'm going to date myself, but when I first started understanding how senior NCOs are managed, long before any great program, there was a dry erase board where all the E9s were slated and it had an up arrow or a sideways arrow or a down arrow for performance and potential. And someone gave me a class on how that works. And it was a relatively close hold at the time, but it really resonated with me. So I still use that system informally for me. But if you've got people, and when I did this for the company back then, we had people that their performance was flatlined and their potential was also flatlined. And they're trying to lead people who are just as competent as they are, who are both up arrows, their performances. And so finally one day you look around and you go, okay, let's just take the names off of this and all of my biases off of it. Who are the right people to lead inside the organization as we think about where we're going to be 1, 3, 5 years from now? That was a complete change in our company, the way we worked. Fast forward now, are there some special operators in the company? Yeah, I think 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone else, all of our leadership positions, minus mine, if you call a leadership position, held by women. Women are crushing it, and we did it with the simple phraseology and application of let's attract, hire, and promote the best people. Full stop. No other caveats. No other disqualifiers. No other no other biases on the table. And man, what happens when you do that? Especially if you form a really good steering committee that'll make sure you're staying on track. Is you look around one day and you're just moving people up the ladder.
Yeah.
And now you look around and the whole dynamic has changed in the company, but it's changed for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And no one, I don't think, and I can always be surprised. I don't think anyone thinks anything but if I'm doing good work here, I'm going to move forward.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to figure out how do we help people out. So that's the thing that I think when you look at it, but this concept of how do you get people in, how do you make them better, how do you make culture work for you, really important. And how do you eliminate those biases, or at least try to eliminate those biases that are inherent to us?
Yeah, trying to minimize them. It's humans, you're never going to get around it completely right. You just got to be aware of them.
Yeah,
it takes that self-awareness, and that goes back to humility, right?
Yeah, and that's I think this is the piece of as we talk about adaptability. It's an attribute for us, but we talk about adaptability. We often think, hey, you get out of an airplane and you're inside an airplane and you jump and land somewhere and you have to adapt to that. In some ways, the same approach has to be there. I'm in this new space called working in the world outside of uniform. Yeah. What is it that's going to take to survive here, and what do I need to thrive here? And that constant analysis, and then leaders, in my case, the job that I have, thinking forward as to where do the opportunities exist, which opportunities are we going to invest in minimally, and which ones are we going to invest in, significantly, so that we can achieve long-term goals. That's the stuff that you can't do that. I mean, I guess you could do it out of the gate, but without the context of the learning around it, it's tough. Back to your original piece of you walk out of the Army with the analytical skills, I think, and the problem solving skills, but without the context of business, I don't think you're going to, and some exposure there of some kind, you're going to struggle a lot in that space.
Yeah. I mean, just the language is completely different. Yeah. That's what I've learned in the last 3 years, really trying to get my head wrapped around business acumen. It's a completely different language that you have to learn. And if you don't adapt to that, people just aren't going to deal. They don't want to deal with you.
Yeah,
because they don't understand what you're saying.
And they'll tell you, hey, you use too many acronyms. Right. But then you'll go in their business meeting and they're using the same, at least as many as you are,
and they change just as much as we do.
And some of the DoD ones, and you're like, all right, we'll go with that. Right? It's okay for you to use it, but I can't. But but that's a lot of fun when you run into it. But it is it's important as you move forward to be able to understand that language and move forward.
Yeah. All right, last topic, and this is I think probably the most important one for me anyway. I think that this is something I wish I would have understood at a much younger age, and probably you too, is being able to take the adversity, take that friction and all the bullshit that comes with dealing with people, right? And instead of just being stressed out about it all the time, or being mad about it, or letting it stop you looking at it, because it's not a barrier. It's just an obstacle you gotta get past. And then taking that and somehow transforming that into something that you can use personally and that your company can use, right? You gave the vignette that we wrote about how your core operating principles are based off almost a catastrophic failure. And obviously we've talked, you're not immune to even be stressed out, like even recently, right? So, but how do you take that, embrace the journey? Like, life is going to continue to kick us in places we don't want to be kicked. So how do we deal with that in the business world?
I think the first thing is, you got to figure out how you're making a difference. Here's the challenge. We can rationalize anything. If you've got special operators out there, we can rationalize anything. I tell somebody, if everything went away today and the only job I could find was, handing out meals at a drive-through window, I'd rationalize coming home and say, man, I made 622 families happy today. I made a difference, right? And they really are making a difference. But the first is you have to understand if you're out there putting forth effort, you have to make a difference, and that difference should be positive. So the challenge is when humans let you down, and they don't let you down on their own most of the time. It is with the best of intent. Often I map that back to, what things weren't in place that set the conditions for them to let you down. That's where I spend a lot of time, because I want to make sure that we are learning everything we can from anything that gives us the opportunity. But you learn a lot more from failure than you ever do from success. And what went on there so that you don't repeat that mistake. Make one mistake, fantastic. Make repetitive mistakes, you're stupid. And that's not good. So, and then this piece of, some people leave the organization, and I'll speak now about us. Some people leave the organization and you sit down with them and you say, hey, this just isn't working out. And it's incredibly professional. And that's what you hope everybody will be. The next group of people, you have that same conversation. You think it's professional. And then there's, I don't know, the term that I use is backbiting, right? It's subtle, but it's over time. People are like, yeah, it wasn't that good. They took advantage of me, this, that, and the other. Well, if you got the mic, you can say that. But the reality is everything's captured and documented. All evidence is there. Mm-hmm. And then you get the people who they're pretty sure they were the gift of the organization, and they've tried to sink your battleship, and you've let them go, and that hasn't been good. And you can bet they're unhappy campers, and they're telling those stories wherever they go of how shitty the leadership was and how bad that person is. And I'm not saying they're wrong, right? That is, everybody is entitled to their perspective, and yes, things could have been better. But the goal being that you're learning from it. I am one of those people that, man, I believe in humans to a fault a lot. And whenever I get it wrong, man, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what I missed, what went wrong, what do I need to do better? It always maps back to me. I mean, I own that because of the job I have. And then what do we need to put in place? A funny story. About 4 years ago, Hannah will know the time specifically, but we changed who's involved with hiring in our company. I used to be out there looking for talent all the time, and it wasn't going well. I mean, my track record of success was probably 5%. And so finally our chief of staff sat me down one day and she goes, I would like to talk about our hiring process. Sure. We think you're this is how there's something drastic about the change. We think you're value added, but we would like to move you to the end of our hiring process when it's all done. Yeah. Why? And she sat me down very clearly and she described two types of people, rescues and strays. And I said, I don't understand. She goes, well, think about it. You pick up a stray pick up a stray puppy off the road. You're not sure what caused them to be a stray. They could have been a great puppy who just kind of broke out of their house. Or they could be a savage killer who, is just, avoided being put down because they're just, capable. But there's no guarantee at all. And there's no real evidence that they're a good fit for the organization. versus a rescue. Someone's taken that person in or that doggy in. They've gave them their shots. They've loved on them. They give me a pretty good perspective of what they're capable of. She said, all I'm trying to say is I think we should take more rescues than strays. And mine now me, I asked, and I'm bringing in a lot of strays. A lot. So we changed much more structure, many depths of our process versus Terry's gut instincts, which were letting us down. And that alone changed our rate of return on investment in people, as well as greatly diminished our early terminations. And so that concept of how do you work through it to make sure you're there. But when we lose someone, someone leaves the organization, I do dwell on it because I want to figure out, one, what we didn't get right, but two, I want that person to move on to great things. And I spend a lot of time in that space. Just like when we lose a client, for what it's worth, right? There have been clients that we have offboarded. We've fired a couple clients, and there have been clients that just said, "Hey, we appreciate everything you've done, and we're finished with you." But even then, even successful completions, did everything right. I spent a lot of time in that space. What did we do there? And I think that's part of the role, because I think you've got to do the analysis. I think analysis is ongoing.
But you're not just ruminating on it. You're actually
there's
going through
there's
it.
There's real structure there, right? Yeah, there's real structure. I mean, there's there is root cause analysis. Mm-hmm. There's behaviors, indicators, on and on and on. And then there's also that back to your invisible friction. Where were the what's the link analysis? Not the friction points and all of that, because we want to make sure that when people come in, we're clear, and what we profess we deliver, we actually deliver. And then also we're learning from that all the time. And that's part of it. But I do spend a lot of time in that space. And it's tough because if you're someone who, this concept of people first, if you care about people and you have people leaving your organization, I think it's going to bother anybody. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the challenge. And it's the same way if you go into an organization and that organization is not right for you and you leave it or you get fired, I think people will dwell on that immensely. Like, what's wrong with me? And I would say, I think the ingredients weren't right. You're probably perfect, but the ingredients need to be adjusted, and you probably need to make some minor tweaks.
That's probably because you're an NCO. If you were a retired general, you'd probably be like,
yeah,
obviously it's not me. It's everybody.
I don't know. There's some pretty darn great generals out there.
Yeah, but I'm still going to talk smack about officers any chance I get, right? Because I think we have to.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it is amazing though. In our space, I get to work with several retired GOs, and it is.
You get one on your board too, right?
Yeah, man, every one of them is just as unique as they were in command. Mm-hmm. Every one of them has something to bring. It is amazing though, what it's like engaging them out and about now. I mean, not anything other than
because they're more of an actual person.
Well, that and man, some of the sense of worth and value they bring and how they monetize it is fascinating to me.
Because it goes along with the name, right? And the fact that they held this position.
And again, I'm proud of anyone who's making as much money as they can, but there are times when, the numbers are just staggering to deal with. And if you're a general officer out there and you're making a mint by some of your engagements, I'm just proud of you.
That goes back to that. I'm not sure where this came from. It might have come from you, actually. The difference between selling out and cashing in, right? And you're allowed to take all of the great things you've done and cash in on that experience versus selling out, which is now you're trying to make a buck because you're going against your own morals and values and everything else, right? I think that's fine, right?
Let me give you one of my favorite people to work with. There's actually two, but Darcy Rogers, if you're out there, General Rogers, I love working with Darcy Rogers. Here's why I love working with Darcy Rogers. If Darcy believes in what you're doing, he tells you that. Mm-hmm. I believe in what you're doing. And then when it comes to working out the deal, and again, this speaks to his trust in me and the company, our transparency with anyone who works with us in that capacity. But Darcy says, hey, I believe in what you're doing. Pay me everything you can. Mm-hmm. And I trust you. And I love the work you're doing. I want to work with you more. If you get someone with that mindset and is as capable as Darcy Rogers, you're going to use them every chance you get, right? Kurt Sontag, same way, right? Kurt Sontag, man, when it comes those two guys in different, I asked them to apply themselves in different areas with us, but man, those two, they work like E5s, and they have the global perspective of what you would think they would as general officers. Man, I love working with those guys.
And for those, if you're listening and you're not really familiar with the military, if you say work is like an E5, because that's the rank in the military as a sergeant where you were just grinding.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that thing that you talked about earlier, where you're playing the traffic cop, you're not going to succeed, and you're not going to be successful, and you're not going to move up in rank. But if you're grinding and you're doing it right, then that's where it's at, right. So
and we won't talk numbers here, but I had I've had just funny conversations with numbers that are, numbers I can't fathom when you're dealing with folks for, a day of their, I need you for 4 hours of your time. And they throw a number at you, and you're like, I did say 4 hours, right? I didn't say a month. I said 4 hours. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay. I don't think we're going to work with you, because I don't know what I should be getting for that. But I know there are plenty of organizations that will pay that.
It better be the Midas touch, right? It better come in and like everything is now golden.
Yeah, I can't. We believe in we're working here. So yeah, it's interesting. But again, when you find those folks, and none of the wages we're talking about are nothing to sneeze at. I mean, again, you get great people, you're going to pay them well, but it is fascinating to interact in that space. And it's all part of, the thing I'll tell everybody is if you know your value and you can make good money off that, do it, right? Never apologize for your rates, never apologize for the cost of anything. And number one rule of sales. But also make sure that you're generating that much value and you're having repeat business. That's when you know that you're doing something right. But that's all part of it. And again, we think about, if you go back to how you got promoted in the Army, in special operations specifically, you met some basic gates, but you really got promoted because you were given an opportunity, you succeeded at that opportunity, someone advocated for you, and then the timing was right, an opportunity existed for you to move up forward and lead more. That is the exact same thing that happens out here, right? Only instead of that individual, it's your business. That's what's happening. Hey, we're going to give you an opportunity, or you generate an opportunity. You prove your worth. Someone advocates for you. Then someone says, hey, we need to give you this opportunity to excel and help us at a larger scale. That's how business is working. When you can understand what that business model is for you, it's going to work out pretty well. If you're struggling with, hey, I'm not sure how I'm going to generate leads or turn this into actual deals, or I'm not sure what I'm actually going to deliver, like one of the great questions that you should ask yourself if you're in the services business is, how will the organization that you're going to work with change because of your efforts? And you should understand that before you go through the door. But I think that's the piece. Go back to this initial transition thing. You're leaving DoD. You want to get a job in the world away from DoD. Understanding what's going to change because of your efforts. That's important to understand that, and that's the good and the bad. We all, by the time we get out, if we've spent more than 2 years in uniform, we got a sense of our strengths, our focus areas, our quirks. We've got those. The question is, how do you make those work for you, and how do you learn and be better every day? How are you better today than you were yesterday? And that's the things that drive you. And for me, man, I love it. I get up every day. I'm like first day of kindergarten, getting off the bus every day, just going after it. I want to make a difference, and then also diving into the benevolent space to help out everything that's helped me get here. I do my best to give back to it, and that's just, I believe in it, and there's nothing tired about me. That's for sure.
So every morning, instead of waking up, Terry Peters going, man, I'm so awesome. What am I entitled to today? You're more like, okay, I have done some things, but what am I doing today that's bringing value to those around me, my company, other companies, society, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to that entitlement and humility thing, right? Like you're only entitled to what you bring, or you're only entitled to what you earn every single day of your life. And life, like none of us are making it out of this alive.
Yeah.
So at some point, we're all going to sit back and look back on our lives. And if you look back and be like, well, I did okay up until this point. Okay, well, this gap right here, like what'd you do in there to be fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
I think that's...
And I think, this is the part of, for me, every Sunday, I write out the things that we and I will accomplish in the week ahead and those areas that we have to learn and develop for the week ahead. Every night at the close of the day, I write analog, because I do a lot of meetings not in front of a computer, the schedule for the next day. And I write the tasks to complete that day with all the notes and all that stuff. Those things are there, one, to make sure that I'm focused and I'm focused on the right priorities, but also to make sure that, I am also growing, learning, evolving, to include time blocked for reading, time blocked for thinking and planning. I think one of the biggest challenges as you are responsible for more than just yourself is making sure that you carve the time to think. If you get too close to things, you get too emotionally attached to them, you just get too close to them, you lose perspective. And if you can carve time to step back, think through things as a senior leader, that's some of the most important time. I dare say the most important time you can apply for your organization. Doesn't mean you get a bite and not lift and get dirty and move things. But if you are not spending that time, you're in transactional problem-solving mode and you're not in transformational thinking mode. And that's not good for you or the organization. Same when it comes to your own life and where you're going. And you think about, you and I've talked about your journey. As you think about, as you are, the uniform is getting behind you now, as you move forward, you're thinking, where am I going to be in 5 years? How do I get there? Right? That's strategic thinking. And that is, what do I need to do? How do I need to get there? The same thing goes for anyone who's leaving uniform or has career change goals and never been in uniform. What are the things I need to do? What conditions need to be set? How do I set those conditions? What do I need to be better at now or in the future than I am now? That's all part of, that's just good application of time. And so that piece of it is added. And it's not, when I get out of bed in the morning, I realize I'm probably behind already and I'm hustling. I feel like most days, it feels like most days I was in special operations. When I was an infantryman, I got up most days feeling like I got this down. I'm doing okay. I've never had one day in special forces where I felt like I was ahead of anything. I felt like I was sprinting to keep up, to stay in the center of the pack every day. It didn't matter what grade, what job, what level. Because the talent around you is so extraordinary. Talent in real businesses everywhere is extraordinary. And those folks are just as focused as any special operator ever was. And then the challenge is, again, if you're asked to be in those organizations, how do you optimize that and bring them together? Because you have skill sets that others just haven't had time to hone. So
I think it's an important thing we'll close it out with this too, that like the visualization, looking ahead of the future, planning, it minimizes random acts of life. In special operations, you see teams all the time do random acts of training, which you'll have an instant, what the commander has said, hey, you need to be good at these things, but then, well, this thing seems really cool and fun. It's like, okay, well, I'm sure that was fun, but is it leading to your desired end state? And the answer most of the time is probably not. Just like with working out, like random acts of physical fitness, like, no, set some goals, set some goals in life. Instead of just doing random acts of life, because time is finite and it's the one resource that we cannot get back, right? So when you're wasting it, you're wasting. So make sure what you're using it for is leading to where you want it to be, right?
And I think this concept of purpose, right? Purposeful movement, purposeful thought, have a purpose, for what you're doing.
Intentionality, right? Often lacking.
Intentionality, right? I think that is so important. And, and again, in our business periodically, we have taken work that's at the fringes of our portfolio. And in order to take that work, and this is, it is part of evolution, you've got to pivot somewhere. You've got to give it some attention. The sweet spot there is when you can give it the attention and it doesn't take away from your primary flywheel or where you're moving to. You can make that adjustment and it doesn't pivot you significantly. It's not a sweet spot when you do pivot significantly and you take your hands off your primary flywheel or other clients and those types of things. And we've done that only once, but we learned that lesson because it was such an awesome opportunity, right? It's one of those, it's such a great opportunity. How can we pass this up? Okay, in order to pass this up at our current size, we've got to downscope some of this effort. We've got to deprioritize some of this stuff. We've got to move here. And man, that works well until this thing doesn't go for the distance or the scope that you thought it was going to be. And now you got to repivot, readjust. And now your organization's just taken on, it's in waters it shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
And so that's the piece, again, if we're going to, kind of tie all this up, understanding that, friction is part of life, having a purpose, knowing what you're going to do. It is very different in the quote unquote real world than it is in special operations, though I wouldn't trade a day of my learning in special operations for anything, even the worst of days. I wouldn't trade, because the learnings there have paid massive dividends, right? I mean, just massive dividends. One of the first clients I interviewed with for our company, this lady asked me, she said, "Are you going to militarize our company when you come out here and help us?" And it took me a little bit of time. I had to end up calling her back, and I said, "Yes, we are going to militarize our company," which was met with a large gasp on the other side of the phone. And I said, "We are going to give you high-performing teams that complete every mission ahead of schedule and under budget.
Yeah.
And they're going to care about each other, and they're going to work toward the greater good. We're not going to blow up anything. We're not going to shoot any guns. Nobody's jumping out of an airplane. No combat. None of that. But we are going to militarize your organization, and I'm going to bring you the best of what special operations NCOs can do. We're going to put that in your mix, and that's worked out well for us. And I think that's the piece that as we drive forward, like, what is the thing that you can do that makes a difference? Do that thing. Mm-hmm. That's the charter, I think.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Terry.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks for the time, man.
I hope it was value added.
Now we can go play some Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah, damn right. Red side, blue side. That now the colors matter a lot more than they used to.
They do, right?
Or maybe it's the same. Just different. That's good.
Cool.
Give you what you need.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome.
Awesome. Okay.
Man, Terry Peters. That guy is just a wealth of knowledge and information. If you like what we're doing, we're putting out, please like and subscribe, whatever outlet you're using to listen to our podcast, whether that's YouTube or Apple iTunes or whatever it might be. It really helps the algorithms to find us. Leave a review if you like what we're doing, number of stars, and write something that also pushes us up so other people can find us. Check us out on social media. We're on LinkedIn. We're on X. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. And check out our website, www.objectivearete.com. We've got the Arete Journal on there. We try to put out plenty of content. We've been slacking a little lately just because we've been super busy, but we're going to get back to the grind. I think we're about 7 days behind right now, but check us out and give us some feedback, man. We've got a contact form on the website. If you think we can do something better, or you'd like to see something or read something or hear something, drop us a line. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want, and we'll get to it. And next time, Mike Laroria will be back as your host, and you'll have to hear me just running my mouth for no reason, because that's what I do. Anyway, later.